Welcome to the second day of IIoT World Days. As a reminder, the creator of this two-day online conference is IIoT World, the leading authority on industrial Internet of Things, which we all call IIoT. This session is Demystifying IIoT and runs from 9 to 9:55 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The sponsor for this session is IIoT World itself. I ask each of you to familiarize yourselves with the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen and ask any questions there. Now I will briefly introduce myself and our four panelists, followed by the panel discussion. Near the end, I will ask them as many questions from the Q&A tool as time allows. Questions we don't have time for will be addressed directly with you in the near future. And we plan a 5-minute break for you between the end of this session and the beginning of the next one. All sessions will start promptly on time. Now, panel introductions. I'm your moderator, Becky Morgan from Cleveland, Ohio, United States. Following 14 years in industry, I founded my consulting business, Fulcrum Consulting Works, Inc. in 1990. I help leaders of mid-sized manufacturing companies create an operation strategy that provides competitive advantage in alignment with the business strategy. Now, to avoid butchering their names, I will introduce our panelists by first name only. They'll pronounce their entire name the first time they have the opportunity to speak. Bettina is located in Germany. She is passionate about people and digitization. In her role as head of Marcoms and sales at Siemens Advanta, the newly designed IoT business unit of Siemens, she helps clients unlock the digital future. She consults decision makers on value creation, digital services, and new data-based business models, as well as on the human factor in IoT. Sophie, located in France, is the Senior Vice President of the digital plant business, developing industrial automation products and systems for hybrid and discrete industries with a strong focus on digital offers and IoT. Since she joined Schneider Electric in 2001, Sophie has gained strong international exposure in Africa, China, France, and Italy, while leading teams in many different functions. Those include marketing, business development, process automation systems testing, customer support, industrialization, and supply chain and training. Next, Rose, located in Kenya, is an emerging technologies enthusiast in aspects of AI, VR, AR, and IoT. Now there's some acronyms for you. She has over the years specialized in improving products and services for clients by using advanced analytics, standing up big data analytical tools, creating and maintaining models, and onboarding compelling new data sets with Internet of Things. Currently, she works as a project coordinator where she links the industry to Strathmore University and offers advisory services for companies engaging in using software such as SharePoint and emerging tech. And last but not least is Petruzza, also located in Germany. She's a management consultant with over 7 years experience in leading projects across industries, focusing on transformation, change management, and digital transformation. A successful track record in diverse geographical spaces, including Germany, Ireland, Romania, and Dubai. She's a former academic with a strong university background and a PhD. Now, that's our panel. As you can tell, they're very qualified, very well-educated, and practical people. We're going to start this session with 2 quick polls so that we can better assess where our audience is and then address our comments specifically to your interests. Greg, would you please post the first poll?
There it comes.
Okay, I'll ask you all to vote so we can get the results. Okay, it looks like our first, the top thing is business use cases. And we are absolutely going to be addressing that quite well. Next seems to be investment and ROI, and we will talk about that as well. And those seem to be the primary ones. Thank you, Greg. And would you please open the second poll now? This is interesting. It seems we've got almost everybody is in the early dividing stages, but there's just 30% of you in a pilot phase for one or more use cases. And there's very few of you that have widespread successful deployment. And we're going to spend a few minutes talking about why it is so hard to get to that stage. So we will be addressing these comments. Panelists, you see where people are? And now let's go ahead and move forward. Thank you, Greg. You can remove that. Now let's start at the beginning. Patrycja, I have two questions for you. First, is double IoT a series of projects, or is it a transformation, a single big transformation?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Petruța Tătulescu. In my experience, IIoT is a deep, profound transformation. However, it can only be achieved through a series of coherent projects. And this is true across different industries. Yeah, based on my experience, I would like to highlight that the transformation as well as the projects take place mainly on two levels. It's the technical level on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's the people and the human factor that are involved.
I'm sorry, I was muted. What is the first step an organization should take before deciding on a double IoT implementation or their first project?
In my experience, the very first step is choosing the right consulting partner. And together with that partner that ideally has experience, define a very clear goal and a very clear desired outcome of the IIoT implementation. Involves defining the budget, the structure, the methodologies, and last but not least, and I was actually very happy to see that in the poll, is getting the management buy-in. A C-level must support the project. But back to your question, first and foremost, choosing the right partner can prove absolutely critical from the very beginning.
Terrific, thank you. Sophie, considering what Patrycja just said, what have you found to be the most important consideration when beginning a double IoT effort?
Thank you, Becky. So my full name is Sophie Borgne. It's a bit French. So yes, indeed, I couldn't agree more with what Petruța just said. To start with, and it was highlighted in the poll somehow, I think it's very important to have the business case in mind. Not so much the detail of the business case, but what is the business problem you are trying to address. I've seen many customers trying by the technology angle, having a technology looking for a problem to solve, that's not the right way. It's super important to start with the problem you are trying to solve and then think how the technology can help. The second thing is to really understand how your transformation is going to affect your existing operation. Is your digital transformation scalable? How are you going to minimize the disruption to your day-to-day business? How do you make sure you provide added value and information to the people in the plant? And the third aspect, which is certainly not the least, is to consider the people aspect. Is your human capital ready to make the most of IoT? Do you have the right collaboration, culture, and skill in place? Have you developed a plan to manage the transformation?
Thank you. Thank you. And I think a very important point there was considering, do you need it to be scalable? And if you do, is it? Rose, could you describe the skills that you find most critical in driving successful IIoT implementations?
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca, for the introduction. And my full name is Rosefina Barasa. I can see some of you have already found me on LinkedIn. So the most complicated skill is to be simple. And in this case, simplicity is achieved by surveying your area and researching and understanding your environment. So the things that would look for is how do you apply the value chain from idea, prototyping, testing, reconstructing, and developing. And so for these skills, I've put them in the layers of the IoT architecture and how to bring them to life. And so we go through to device layer, where you need engineers that understand what endpoint IoT devices are, how to combine hardware and software components. And you go to the communication layer, where you focus on embedded software development for field gateways. So this is network engineers who understand protocol layers, TCP, IP. And then you deal with data management layer, where you deal with data streaming and data storage. So here you have people who are experienced in cloud computing technologies and can design and implement and maintain reliable, scalable data management solutions. Then the last two is data analytics, where data analytics skills are intensely sought for. And so you need people who understand what batch parallel processing is, implementing machine learning and visualization of data. Then the last one is user communication layer, and this falls by two segments. So it's web and mobile user apps. So here you have to focus on the web and mobile backend development, web design, user interface design, and how you can bring these applications to respect that they meet the qualities that the users will be able to perform with them. Yeah, so those are my two. Back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, thank you. And I want to remind people to enter your questions in the Q&A button, not on the chat button. I will be monitoring the Q&A and we'll be using those questions later in this session. I'm not monitoring chat. Okay, now let's turn to some of the main challenges. Bettina, even considering the advice that we've just been given, and we've just been given a lot, many or maybe even most transformations, technical transformations and IIoT transformations fail. Could you help us understand the major challenges and why so many fail? Is it a common cause? Are there very unique causes by company? What's the big challenge?
Well, Rebecca, first, it's like every project we do in IoT, it's not like a billy shelf from IKEA you just buy and then install. It's unique as the fingerprint of our customers is. The main reason what we see why things fail is that you start somewhere without a proper vision. That's the one thing. So we heard already, what should it do? What kind of business problem it should address or solve? And IoT can do magic, but it's not a silver bullet, yeah? It will not create magic out of everything. And IoT is a technology and it's not itself a transformation. And that is the reason why a lot of initiatives fail, because it's simply nothing you would download from an app store and press self-install and then it's done. You need to bring your people on board, and you need to bring your people through the digital transformation, and that's the hardest part. And this is what is usually left out of the equation, that it is about people having different tools, different methodologies, different processes, different mindsets and skills that are needed. And that's why we often see, if this is not considered from the early beginning, then usually these projects really suffer and the sustainability of these projects is poor. The next thing is there are still a lot of question marks over decision makers' heads about what about cybersecurity, what about asset management, what about then the change management? Will it ever pay off? When will it pay off? There are questions and there are a lot of answers to these questions, but sometimes it really happens that these questions only pop up in the middle of a POC. And this is what we see as the second big step. We see a lot of people in this, what we call POC limbo or POC purgatory, and they are unable to scale up from this one POC they did, because then the fun part begins to bring this whole stuff into your existing IT legacy system structure. And that is not so easy as well. So people and scaling are two big things why a lot of IoT initiatives fail.
And when you were saying POC, you mean proof of concept?
Yeah.
Bettina?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah, when we use acronyms.
Sorry, yeah, sure.
I just want to be careful that everybody in the audience knows
Exactly
what we're referring to.
Proof of concept, and you would hear also proof of value. So would it create any value and how to capture this value? But in this sense, it's really the proof of concept, starting small with one use case. And then if this is successful, trying to scale that across plants, across regions, across countries. This is where we usually see a lot of issues coming up.
Well, and scalability, a follow-up question for you. If a company is small and only has one plant, does scalability mean we're going to start it on one machine and then spread it across one machine? We're going to start it with one logistics.
Exactly. Absolutely. So when you look into, maybe you want to find out what kind of data you can gather from one maybe stamping machine, whether it stamps in the right way, or if you detect some deviations from the normal, when would you need to stop this machine to maintain it? And you'd rather do that not in the full steam of your production, but in a planned downtime, so to speak. And when you gather that from one machine, you can gather that from a lot of other machines, eventually leading into a digital twin of your whole factory, where you really have in real time all the data about what your factory machines are doing and what kind of energy they consume and what kind of parts may be failing in the near future. So you can plan the maintenance a little bit better, that will increase the efficiency of your plant by far. Just imagine if you would need, or if you had an unplanned downtime in an automotive factory and the conveyor belt is not running and you cannot produce these cars that are millions of euros that are wasted. So you could start small with one machine, but eventually leading to displaying your whole factory in a digital twin.
Terrific. Thank you for that. Now, valid business cases was important to our audience. And they're important to the success of any technology application. As businesswomen, we all know that technology for technology's sake is useless. I'm going to ask a couple of you to share one or two business cases that you found that have added incredible value to a business, and help us understand the before and the after in the business case. And as you give us specific examples, then I'm going to ask to generalize them to help our audience. Sophie, would you mind going first?
So let me take the example of what we did in our own factories. We are an industrial company with over 300 factories, and we started 2 years ago a program that we called Smart Factory, with a lot of creativity, to apply our own technology to our plants. The reason that we had in mind was to go beyond the lean approach that we have been doing for years, and to go beyond operational efficiency, and we tackled very specifically sustainability. So we wanted to make sure that every kilowatt hour of energy, every ton of raw material, every hour of labor was used in an optimal way, both from financial and environmental perspective. On top of that, we wanted to make sure that the technology was here to support the people and empower the workers that are working in our factory, and not the other way around. So what we did, we deployed our very own IoT solution. We didn't spend too much time to select the technology provider. We used our own. And we've deployed now in 2 years in a bit more than 80 plants. So 2 examples in terms of return on investment. The first one really on energy efficiency. We've deployed several solutions to be more efficient, which means to consume less energy for the same output. And we've achieved 21% energy saving. For us, it's 377 tons of CO2 per year reduced. So we have reduced our carbon footprint in a significant way, which is helping toward our commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. The second example of return on investment is how this helped to empower our workforce, giving people in the shop floor the right information when they need it. So we have, they use what we call augmented operator advisor to really help people to do the right decision in very short cycle. And with that, we've achieved, to take several examples, in our factory of Le Vaudreuil in Normandy, France, we reduced the diagnostic time for machine stopping by 20%. In our plant in Mexico, in Monterrey, we've reduced the mean time to repair by 20%. And in our plant in Batam, in Indonesia, we have reduced the downtime of the production line by 44%. So all this has been measured after some months and years of experience and is delivering tangible results, starting from the business intent that we had back to the actual saving coming. I think that makes us one of the few answering the polls at the beginning where we were successful to have a widespread successful deployment across the company. However, we started small. We never started with a plan to do all 80 factories at the same time. We started by one, and we didn't even start by one factory. We started with one machine in that factory, and we did small steps. And it was driven by the people on the shop floor, so the people using it. It was not a corporate program with decision taken far away from the reality of the production line. It is a program of change management where each and every operator, maintenance technician is involved in the transformation. That's a bit more difficult to measure in terms of involvement, but it has definitely helped to deliver the tangible return on investment in terms of energy saving or improvement on maintenance.
Thank you, Sophie. Boy, that's fascinating. And I'm glad you added that you started with one machine in one plant, because you're a very large company and presumably a very technically capable company because of your product lines. A lot of our participants here are not that large. So it really helps that you explained how you did that. Bettina, do you have some case studies, business cases to share?
Sure. And to build on what Sophie says, so what we at Siemens Advanta and Siemens used to do is drinking our own champagne, so to speak. You know, when we come up with IoT use cases, we test them in our own factories just to make sure they are functioning. And it's the same way here around. We started with a very, very tiny plant in Berlin with one use case. That's one of my favorite because it's so simple, but it delivers brilliant and beautiful results. So just imagine you have an assembly line where different parts come together. And in some of these things, when your supply chain is not 100% secure, then you create these idle times where these things that they stroll around on these conveyor belts. So what we did was with very tiny cameras by a Raspberry Pi driven, connected. So at first the algorithm was learning how would these pieces come together, what are the idle times. And we have created an algorithm based on machine learning that then understands, oh, okay, if I stop this little particle here, then the next can come in and I'm reducing these idle times. It's a very, very simple thing, a very complicated algorithm though. And it can reduce the idle times in manufacturing up to 30%. And 30% increase of efficiency in a plant is really amazing. So we are testing that now over and over again. We have customers that are implementing that as well. So this is a very easy thing, because implementing small cameras and having an algorithm to it and a software to it is not rearranging your whole plant. So even for smaller factories, for smaller production sizes, this is a very nice use case that shows that it really can deliver brilliant results. As said, 30% scaling up the efficiency in one plant is really, for a lot of plants, it's rocket science. Yeah? And maybe to add on that one, coming into the bigger scale, we've implemented a whole IoT, let's say, world and ecosystem for one of our biggest customers, Suzhou Leasing in China, which is a leasing factory that leases trucks, that leases metros, that leases cranes, that leases hospital equipment, all sorts of kinds. So it's a vast majority of pieces they lease, but they never had insight in what is the actual status of my components, what is the actual status of my goods that are out there to some customers, and what is the condition of these things. So there was always a high risk of a machinery failing and not delivering to the project deadlines, etc. pp. And we connected more than 700 assets in one dashboard in real time, that you have an overview of what your goods and what your leasing goods are doing in this respective moment, and whether you would need to plan a maintenance for that, or whether you have free capacity that you can broker to some other customers, etc. So 700 assets connected, which means that a lot of assets, let's say, speak a different language. So for to say the machinery in the hospital speaks Chinese, the machinery of the crane speaks English, the machinery of your trains that you have your rolling stock speaks maybe Dutch or something. So it requires to harmonize the language of the different assets that speak and bring that into one overview. And then UX UI design was very needed, because you need to look onto the first glimpse, what is the condition of your assets. And that leads to over 10% productivity efficiency overall over all these 700 assets, which is millions and millions of euro that you spare just because you know in what condition your assets are. So you can play it very small, you can play it really big, but as Sophie already said, it starts usually with a small nucleus, and from there you spend and you scale up fast in order to really understand what you need to do to learn while you're going. It's an agile approach. It is not a waterfall logic. And this also means that decision makers do not need to make this one big decision that costs them millions of euro. Rather, it's decision after decision after decision going along the path of IoT implementation.
So quick follow-up there. Does that mean small steps should each have an ROI, return on investment?
It can be, it does not necessarily be, yeah. You need to be flexible, amending on the way. So if you really want to drive a transformation, you should look at the transformation as a holistic view. And this is not only technology, just to be very precise here. You need to consider the change management aspect. You need to consider training for your people. You need to consider buying software, maintaining software. You need to consider if this would be the case that you're offering new services and what kind of price would come to that when you offer that to your customers. So you should, if you're planning for a bigger transformation, always have the bigger ROI in your view. But you need to look into the smaller pieces as well, whether they would pay off or whether that would be just a nice to have.
And sometimes they're just a great learning experience, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, my friend Rose is sitting in Kenya right now. And my friend Patricia, I think, is sitting in Germany right now. Who knows where she
Correct.
is? I think she's in
Correct.
Germany right now. Technology is international, and so is business. We have a very international panel. We have an international audience. I would like to ask Rose and Patricia to describe distinctions you've seen across countries, if any. You may say it doesn't matter what country you're in, the process is the same, or you may say it's very different. Rose, could you start us off on that?
Okay, so thank you for that question. Having worked for a company that implements industrial IoT across East Africa, and having implemented, having mentors also who have implemented in different continents, I think the major distinctions that I've noticed is that IoT develops, offers development for low-cost and sustainable approach to various technologies. And the key is to be used mostly for predictive maintenance. So here we have to listen and learn and use this data that we are constantly collecting, no matter in which continent you're located, to focus on the risk management, the increase in machine utilization, and staying on track for production. So you can find that there is increased automation and it improves output, but what is also the infrastructure like? How expensive or is the hardware and the limited technological background for people who develop or deploy this IoT services. And also, I think the major thing that I also wanted to focus on is the three significant issues that we always have to look out for deploying industrial IoT, and is the longer range for rural to urban access. So this focuses on GSM, GPRS, 3G, and 5G, which is being talked about right now. And also the cost of hardware and services. I think for me, when I was deploying and doing IoT, working as an IoT specialist here, and I focused on the healthcare and food production areas, you'd find that most of them don't want to invest into these products because they're very, very expensive, however good the advantage is. And the last one is to provide local interaction model. So as much as we want to, make a blanket approach and say this is working for another continent, we have to look at how are we addressing the immediate need. So for this, I can even give an example for Rwanda, where they have, robots that are using IoT also. And it's in the healthcare sector for, temperature screening, detecting people not wearing masks, and education for patients and self-diagnosis by also delivering food to patients. So it really depends on the immediate need and how you have surveyed the area to learn and use that data. Yeah.
Greg, there's serious background noise that's not coming from one of the panelists. So if you could try to figure the source in that, it would be helpful. Thank you. Petruzza, could you address the question of globalization? Are we all one big place that can do the same thing, or is it very different?
Thank you for that question, Rebecca. Well, in my experience, the differences between industries, at least the industries that I worked in, for example, energy, airlines, banking, the differences between industries are not that great, but the differences between geographical places are really vast. I've worked so far in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, and in the Middle East. And the differences are many, many levels. For example, the regulatory frame. For example, the perceived hierarchy within the team and how people go about that hierarchy. But I think first and foremost, the biggest difference that I would like to highlight in this very short space we have here is the team. In some places, the teams are very diverse in regards to gender, in regards to qualifications, in regards to educational background. And I would really like to emphasize that those that had the biggest diversity were also the most successful. So the more diverse the team, the better. That's my experience.
Terrific, that's helpful. Now, people were interested in the partnership aspect, but I'm going to ask Sophie and Bettina to quickly summarize the top 2 considerations in choosing who a company beginning this process should partner with, or should they wait till they're further down the road to even think about partners? We did hear one of our panelists say the first thing is to choose a partner. Well, if we're going to do that initially, how do we do it wisely? Sophie?
Yeah, well, I think IoT is really an area where you should not be shy to partner. I see all kinds of customers. Some of them want to master everything from the infrastructure, connectivity, develop their own application, run their own analytics. Okay. Some other prefer an off-the-shelf application that can fit exactly what they need, and then you have all the possibilities in between. The beauty of IoT architecture is that they are open by nature. So because they are open, there is a great opportunity to use as many partners as you can to make it fitting exactly your needs. So my recommendation in choosing the partner will be to go for, I would say, generalist company for all the infrastructure and the parts that will be common to each and every customer. And there is a part of the IoT that is very generic. But then to go to some domain experts, in particular for the analytics, it's easy. Well, it's 2 different things: to gather data and to analyze the data. So gathering data is one part of the IoT story. And for this, I will go with partners that have this kind of expertise. And if you want to create value out of that data, then you need a partner that understands your process. Optimizing a car manufacturing line or optimizing a beer bottling line, it's not the same. So developing the algorithm to do both can strongly benefit from an expert in one and an expert in the other process. So don't be shy in choosing partners. Choose them based on their either technology or domain expertise, and leverage a full ecosystem of partners to get the best value that you can get.
Terrific, thank you. Bettina, your thoughts?
Well, building on what Sophie already said, it is of absolutely advantage to have a partner at your side that can differentiate between noise in the data and meaning in the data. So that requires deep domain know-how. So that would be my first advice. Find somebody who is familiar with your vertical, with your industry, what you are doing. A lot of people claim to have this domain know-how, and we see that over and over again, that we get customers that come from places that told them, I understand your data, and then in the end they were just left in the air, so to speak. An ecosystem is another thing that is really important. Find somebody that is able to go the journey with you end to end, from consulting to prototyping and design, doing a proof of concept, building up the solution and the architecture that is needed, implement it, and maybe help you also in the first steps of the operation. So we see that end to end is really mission critical here, because sometimes you come from one partner that says, hey, this is a beautiful square we are going to design you. It hands it over to some partner that does a plan, then it becomes a little bit edgy. And in the end, you're left with a circle, because the people that need to implement then cannot follow up this beautiful plan that says, I'm going to create a square for you. So find a partner that is able to go end to end the whole journey with you, and that does not step out when there might be rough waters or when it's becoming a little bit itchy. A trustworthy partner that stays with you until the stuff is done.
Terrific, thank you. Now, before we enter the Q&A section of this discussion, I'm going to ask each of our 4 panelists to briefly share the most important point she wants you, the audience, to remember when you leave this session. So, Rose, one important point you want them to not forget.
Okay. Well, I think the key point that I need to put across is that industrial IoT is a real enabler in a lot of continents, and even here in Africa. And so, we want to focus this future trend of the industry to developing intriguing projects and help manufacturers who have a long, capital cycle or lack of data and analytics to ensure that they get the benefits that come with playing outside of the industry or outside of the plant to increase priority and productivity. So for me, Strathmore has an IoT lab that is fully there for prototyping, and we're also open to understand what challenges we can get on together and solve. And this is from scalability all the way to power supply. And we are happy to, collaborate and get along in those aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrycja, what's the one thing you want people to walk away from this with?
Well, the one thing, if I have to pick just one, embrace the change and transformation with the right partner and that has a diverse background, and think of IIoT transformation as an opportunity rather than a challenge. Again, with the right partner. Obviously, it costs time and money and effort to begin with, but in the end, it does save a lot of money and it brings your business on a state-of-the-art level.
Thank you. Sophie, your number one thing, if they remember nothing else, what should they remember?
So for me, digital transformation is successful if you think business, people, and technology, and in that order. Business objective first, people for the transformation, and don't worry, with IoT technology you can solve everything, but that's come last and not first.
A very important thought process there. And Bettina, what's the number one thing?
For me, the number one thing is don't be too afraid. Start small, scale fast, and find a partner that will go the journey with you end to end.
Terrific. I think we've got some good advice. Now, what we're going to do is look at some questions. And when I address these questions, I'm going to ask whichever panelist is most comfortable answering it. You can just start. And if you step on each other, whoever started first wins. Okay, our first question is from Sam. How do you engage SMBs, which I assume is small to medium businesses, who are not as aware of Industry 4.0, let alone IIoT?
I can pick that one. Sam, I would go back to what I said at the very beginning. It's critical to get the management buy-in. Convince your CEO that this is relevant, this is important, this is something you need to do right now. And yes, it will cost them money and time and effort, but in a few months' time or in a year, they will be much better off than if they did.
Patrycja, I'm sorry, the sound, at least on my end, went out at the very end of your statement.
Okay, I'm not sure which part.
Okay, sorry. It was just at the very end. So you may have made your most important points first.
Yeah, basically, even if it's a painful process, but at the end of the day, the outcome will be so much better, and do it rather than just keep pushing it and keep thinking, oh, I'll do it later, because that is going to come and get you at one point.
Absolutely. Okay, Praveen has a question. How do we show business value of IIoT to C group people? It says at early definition page, I think that means stage. So in the early stages, how do you show the business value to your executives?
Yeah, that's the killer question, I guess. It's you know, IIoT is getting into a more and more mature status, and there are already numbers available when IoT projects pay off. And it's very hard to find a solid number of what it's going to bring when you have not started. So what you always can do is, it's a corridor in a return on investment calculation that you can come up with. And I think C-level would doubt you if it tells you you will save 14.7562% of your resources. That's not really reliable. but you can do your best in figuring out what are the effects of these things you want to start, of the initiative you try to run, and at least come up with a corridor of it should land somewhere there. And take numbers that are already available on the market. There are good studies about IoT already available, and ask peers. So there are a lot of good blogs and communities also available that can help you out with how soon it will pay off and what kind of resource optimization percentage you might bring it to the table of your C people.
Terrific. So do you just Google for those? Is that the best way to find them? Well,
actually, some studies are available on analyst areas, and there are open numbers. Yeah, you would Google them for that. And I'm pretty sure that you have your industry roundtables where you can ask around if people already have installed IoT and what their experiences and their numbers show.
Okay, thank you. Gurdeep, and I'm sorry if I butchered that, asks, any insights that the panel would like to share on how to buy in the lower management and workforce when moving towards IIoT? Now, some of you talked about how critical that is to have, some of the panelists discussed how critical it is to have the operators be part of this. So how do you get lower management and the workforce to buy in?
I can pick that up. Sophie, go for it.
So I think the best way is to have them involved from the very beginning. And one easy way to do that, if you are looking for where to start your project, just go to the shop floor, discuss with the people on the shop floor, understand what is the machine giving them the most trouble, what is the one that is always falling down when you have to produce and it's creating a bottleneck in the full factory. They know. Ask them what they need, and then ask them how technology can help them. So as long as you position the technology as something that is going to make their life easier, it's much easier to manage the transformation.
Thank you, thank you. Jose asks, and this question is addressed to Rose and Bettina, how do you get all those skilled people blocks in the IIoT chain to unsilo themselves from looking only at what they do best to collaborate and see the IIoT solution from the user experience perspective?
Yeah, so what we usually do is you would never, or you should never start an IoT initiative out of one silo or only top down. Yeah, this, as Sophie said, it will not work. It will create a huge resistance. So what we do for our own IoT deployments within Siemens and Siemens Advanta and with our customers is you need to build a cross-functional team, and you need to bring these skilled people together in a kickoff. And you need to have a clear vision of what you really want to achieve in order to envision that what would be the future for every single silo or for every single branch in this company. And to create this buy-in, you need to have people working toward that and being a part of it, rather than just, you know, telling them this is the next cool thing we're going to do, hooking up to some buzzwords. So you need to build this cross-functional team. You need to find lighthouses in the company to build these bridges and to talk to these people. And this is the actual change management task, to combine all the skill sets that are available in one company and to lower the resistance by making them part of the task and part of the journey, and not just telling them we're going from A to B and now you need to follow. This is not going to work.
Okay,
yeah, I think I agree so much with Bettina on that. It's just to make actionable the platforms and the trends that are associated with that transformation that you are trying to work towards. So you include, you know, inclusivity and diversity for all that.
Thanks. And we have time for one last question. Gitu, and again, I apologize. It is refreshing to see all female panelists here. Thank you for the focused discussion. I would say we have all brilliant panelists who happen to be female, but yes, you did make a correct observation. The question, how do we best address the people dimension of transformation, parenthetic new skills, mindsets? do we scope this as part of the IIoT transformation, or do we expect the commissioning company to take care of internal change management? That's an excellent question.
I can pick that up. I've had that with a few companies, and yes, the external partner will help you do that, but you have to internalize it. And there is the people. I think I said that at the very beginning. There is the technical dimension of an IoT transformation, but there's always the people dimension, and they both must go together. If you only have one and you don't have the other, it's worth nothing, basically. And also to just build up on what Sophie, Bettina, and Rose have just said. You have to include those people. You have to start with the people. You have to prepare them for the change, then make them part of the change, and then fulfill that change together with the people. That's the only way forward. If you just come up with the nicest, most wonderful IT product and want to implement it, and people won't agree, won't like it, won't use it, won't know what to do with it, then it's worth nothing.
Thank you, Patricia. And I'm going to ask if one of the other panelists would also like to address this and add on. I mean, I'm reading into this question, how much of the commissioning company, that is the company that's doing the IoT transformation from within, how much are they responsible for their own change management versus can they outsource the change management?
Well, let's say it this way. It's in a lot of companies, change management is not learned, and there are no experts how to do that. So what we see is that a lot of companies reach out to us when they started already their journey, and then they see this huge resistance and things are not working as expected. And then, yeah, you can send your, so to say, your troops in and you can help out, but it will never work if you're not trying to install this skill set and this knowledge in the company itself. And it does not mean you have to have a fully fledged full-time employee on change management. There are always people, what we see, that are eager and willing to support and to learn and to grow in this kind of new or extra role. And this is this is the most efficient way. You need to have it from within. You might get help from outside, but you need to have people that care about the sustainability of the initiative you're running, and that it's not crumbling while the troops that you send in the first place are going out again, and you have the same resistance as before. So it needs to have a nucleus, a kernel within the company to really make sure that you drive innovation and digital transformation efficiency.
Yeah, thank you. There was a one question that we're not going to have time for, but it was, is this similar to the beginnings of ERP, enterprise resource planning? And, ERP in various forms has been around for like 50 years now, but there are still companies that haven't figured it out and their data is still not reliable, et cetera. And, I think it's important that companies realize that any new technology, no matter what it is going to change your company. And if you have not successfully implemented changes before of any kind, you're not going to do this successfully either. You really have to learn how to manage change and how to leverage change of any kind to do IIoT or ERP or any of the other changes that are coming. And if you don't know how, and we're not necessarily born with it, you may need outside expertise to help teach you some of the tools and techniques that are available to help with that. But you've got to be realistic. If you've never made a successful change before, IIoT will not be your first. I'll just add that. That is all that we have time for in the questions today. I want to thank our panelists. They have done a fabulous job of answering the questions of the ones that you, the attendees, have asked, of providing insights based on the poll results. I want to thank the audience for giving us an opportunity to share with you some of our knowledge and experience, and also to share the questions that you have. And I want to thank IIoT World, the organization, for putting this on. A 2-day international conference with over 14,000 participants is just amazing. It's a tremendous global exchange of information. So I want to thank them for that. I do want to remind all the attendees that the platform you're using allows you to request connections with speakers and with one another. Rose mentioned earlier that she's already been reached out on LinkedIn, so have I. I'm sure all the panelists have been. Please use this platform, LinkedIn, whatever you want to make connections, because it's using the experience and ideas of others that helps us each be successful. So at this point, it's 9:55. Starting on the hour next in this track is removing barriers to digital transformation. I'd like to thank you all and enjoy your 5-minute break.